2025 was an eventful year for East and Southeast Asia, a year of major world historic anniversaries commemorating a series of epic defeats for imperialism. In April, Vietnam celebrated 50 years since reunification with an incredible military parade in Ho Chi Minh City, then topped it in September with an even bigger one in Hanoi to mark 80 years of independence from France and Japan. Just one day later, China made its own statement of intent with a massive military parade at the heart of Beijing, commemorating 80 years since the surrender of Japan and the end of what China, Russia, and the Global South remember not as World War II, but the World Anti-Fascist War. So 8 decades later, has Japan learned its lesson, or has its own blood-soaked legacy of fascist empire merely subordinated itself to new US masters? In November, Japan's new Prime Minister Sane Takaichi, far-right provocateur and war crime denier extraordinaire, gave a resounding answer to that question by threatening war on China over its island province of Taiwan, which was first colonized by Imperial Japan itself, then separated again under a US puppet regime after the communists liberated the mainland in 1949. Today, Taiwan's de facto leaders are hardcore separatists, more extreme than ever in embracing Zionism and the US empire. But domestically, their popularity collapsed in 2025 with a string of humiliating defeats in recall elections, the rise of a fresh-faced, pro-unification opposition leader, and a disillusioned youth who looks to mainland China not with fear, but with admiration and envy, to say nothing of the extreme strain that Trump is putting on all his Asian vassals' unrequited love affairs with the US, demanding they raise military spending to 5% of GDP, while slapping 20% tariffs on Taiwan, 15% on Japan, and 15% on South Korea. For South Korea, it's an especially bitter pill to swallow. Not only does it pay for its own occupation by the US military, it's forced to invest a staggering $350 billion in the US economy, while watching ICE brutalize hundreds of Korean nationals. Meanwhile, the far right embraces the West's culture wars as its own, from xenophobia to Zionism to Charlie Kirk to Stop the Steal. And it still hasn't forgiven the anti-imperialist Korean masses for defeating Yoon Suk-yeol's coup attempt last December. Out of all the region's manufacturing powerhouses, only one stood up and defied Trump's bullying outright, forcing him to retreat from his threats of economic blackmail. When China faced tariffs of 54, then 104, then 145% in April, it struck back blow for blow and forced Trump to blink first. When the US imposed draconian export controls on semiconductors, China retaliated by cutting off its supply of rare earth minerals, threatening to bring the US military and auto production to a screeching halt. Again, the US beat a humiliating retreat, in a resounding affirmation of China's long-term strategy of building its own sovereign technological base. It's paid off in the realm of AI, where DeepSeek began the year by blowing its US competitors out of the water for a fraction of the cost. It continues to pay dividends in renewable energy, where China again broke records in solar, wind, and EV production, installing more capacity than the rest of the world combined. And as Asia and the world head into a deeply uncertain 2026,